on the west side along Wilkinson Boulevard, the whole way into Center City. Last night we did Focus Area 1, which is the town of Belmont in Gaston County into I-485. So just as a note, we do have a team of panelists available to answer technical questions as they come up. So on the live Q&A, we do have a lot of people who are available to answer questions as they arise. But for panelists, as a reminder, please remain on mute until the Q&A portion of the meeting. For participants, please log into your Gmail or your YouTube account to participate in the live Q&A. For best quality streaming, log off any organizational VPNs. Post questions in the chat box to be answered at the end of the meeting. If we don't get to your question, we'll address them on our website with a future frequently asked question. So for the agenda, pretty straightforward, pretty clear. We're really going to provide an overview of the project and also to talk about some alignment refinements and preliminary staff recommendations. So that's the recommendations we intend to get public feedback on over this process and then take forward into the Metropolitan Transit Commission in the March and April timeframe. And then we'll do a live Q&A session. So the team assisting with the delivery and of the Silverline is complementing myself is Jen Nichols. She's the LYNX Silverline Deputy Project Manager. Ajanelle Poole, she's the LYNX Silverline Public Information Officer. John Howard is the LYNX Silverline TOD Manager. And Jason Lawrence is the LYNX Silverline Rail Trail Manager. So like any of a big project, this is really one coordinated effort that really involves many different parties and participants and stakeholders. Zooming out to regional transit and looking for how we can best serve the many regional interests that are really interested in how they can get around via transit, what projects can provide service to them and their communities. NCDOT is a big part of this because of the many NCDOT projects and many of the corridors that the LYNX Silverline will be going down or adjacent to are owned and operated by NCDOT. There's also part of the 2040 City of Charlotte Comprehensive Plan. There's also many regional planning organizations such as Gaston and Union County Planning, many municipal planning jurisdictional towns such as Matthews, Belmont, Sallings, Indian Trail are all part of, also have plans that are also working with. And then really as part of the broader Silverline program, besides the light rail, the nuts and bolts light rail program, there's also a complementary TOD program and a rail trail program, which seeks to really identify a vision for not just light rail, but also the land use improvements around light rail and a rail trail that goes the entire length of the 26-mile project. Similar to that, what we looked at along South Boulevard or along through South End, very popular. And we have some folks on with us tonight who can address those sort of issues in the presentation. So just to jump right into it, the map that in front of you is our preliminary staff recommendation. As a note, the Silverline project is quite large. It's 26 miles, and it really goes from the town of Belmont in the west the whole way to the town of Indian Trail in the southeast. Because of the size and scale of the project, it's broken up into 6 areas. We call them focus areas, and you can see them on this map. And it really just is just a way to break up the project so we could organize our public meetings and people could kind of get their head around a project of this size. Just as a note, the blue line and blue line extension were about 9 miles, give or take. And so the Silverline project is nearly 3 times longer than either the blue line or the blue line extension. So it's a very, very big project. And so breaking it up like this kind of helps people organize their thoughts and kind of focus in on the areas that they care about. At this point, we do have 26 miles of alignment, 30 stations, and 1 maintenance facility that we're pursuing. So the preliminary purpose of the project, and when I say purpose, what we're talking about is when we go through a federal process, a federal environmental and funding process, we have to develop something called a purpose and need, which basically declares, why are we doing this? Why are we pursuing this project? So we put that out for public input in the September timeframe and got some input on that very, very successfully. And we also got some input from our agency stakeholders who are really looking at this from a federal level. So just to go quickly through the purpose of the project is to provide a competitive and reliable transit alternative improves local connectivity and access to housing, employment, and community services in the corridor, promote opportunities for development, provides a transit system that is financially sustainable to build, operate, and maintain, preserve and protect the natural and built environment. So that's our stated purpose of the project. When we presented that as part of our early scoping, and that was our round 2 meetings that we had in September. As part of that early scoping, and early scoping is just really, it's an early federal review, the federal agencies who do the permitting and ultimately funding of these projects. You review these projects at a high level early on, especially these big complex projects, to ensure that there's no big red flags early on from an environmental perspective, but also get in to take an early look at the project. So really, they kind of looked at some of the previous planning that has been done over the last 20 years along this corridor. They looked at alignment refinement options and potential station locations, all the things that we presented in our September rounds of public meetings. They provided review and comment on our preliminary purpose and need. They've identified any potential environmental concerns, and also looked at our public engagement methods. And that's an interesting topic, because we really started our public engagement in February, right before the coronavirus crisis struck. We were planning on having public meetings like we always do, with face-to-face with paper maps, but all that changed. So we really pivoted. So there was a lot of interest and focus on the way that we're doing virtual meetings. And I think we've done a pretty good job of pivoting to this virtual environment. So we've got some good marks on that one. Regarding some findings from the early scoping, from the public engagement, we did have about 800 comments from the survey that we put forward as part of that September round of public meetings. We did, in that survey, the top priorities from survey participants were really focused on local connectivity, and that's really about getting from your home to wherever your destination is via light rail, so that people want to make sure that they can get, whether that's as a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or a bus rider, or an automobile, they can get from wherever they are to wherever they're going easily via light rail. Nearly 90% of the respondents agreed with the preliminary purpose and need statements. That's a good bar. There was general support for the project. 4 out of the 5 respondents thought the alternatives considered were adequate, but other suggestions were considered. And we're used to getting different ideas on alignments and stations, so we continue to address those as they come. And so where we are right now in the early, we're at the very beginning of the pre-project development phase. So really kind of looking at the overall alignment. We don't have a lot of detail about particular footprint issues, meaning how wide the project is in a particular piece of property. We do get a lot of real estate questions, and that's understandable. But we don't have a lot of those details, because we really need to progress that engineering a little bit further on, so we can speak specifically on a case-by-case basis. But we're really kind of focused on refining the alignment, and that's really what I'll talk about what refinement means. But it's really about getting more detail about that alignment and more definition about what the project is. As I said, we also completed early scoping, and now that we're coming forward with a recommendation to public input, and then we intend to take that to the Metropolitan Transit Commission in this spring, in the March and April timeframe, to adopt the alignment. And then after we adopt that alignment, then we would begin some of the area planning, the station area, the land use planning, and the more detailed engineering work. And we'll have some folks who can talk a little bit more about that area planning process. So when we talk about alignment refinement, really what we're talking about is taking the general corridor that was adopted back in 2019, and you could think about that like a fat Sharpie line, and that's like the blue line on the left. That's a general corridor that said, we know we want it to be in Belmont, we know we want it to be to Indian Trail, but exactly how we get there, it wasn't overly specific. That's kind of where we started. But our task is really to take that from a big thick line down to a thin line, so we have more definition for what we're trying to accomplish, and then also to progress that forward and continue to get more definition as we go on. And so the way that we've done that is really break up
the big fat line into many, many smaller lines, more detailed alternatives to that big line, different ways we could define it. And then once we have those many lines, then we do a shortlisting process to identify what our preliminary recommendations is. And so that's where we're planning on being with the green line on the right side, which is what we're calling the refined locally preferred alternative. So really the first step is, once you have the big line, how do you break that up? And really using these kind of tenets to kind of break up that big line into the many 100+ lines of potential alignments. And really what we looked at is really going into a much deeper level of definition from an engineering and environmental perspective, really kind of digging deep on some of these things to really understand some of the trade-offs associated with each alignment alternative. We looked at changes in the corridor. The West Corridor was adopted in 2019, so it was pretty new and it had been studied, just a couple years ago. So there really wasn't too many things in conflict with the locally preferred alternative at that time. But some certain areas of the Silver Line, like along the Southeast Corridor, some of those are more than 5 years old since anyone has really looked at them. So certain things have changed over time. Buildings have been built, and we had to take a step back and really look at the alignment to make sure that there's no big conflicts within the line that would cause us to potentially change our thinking. One of the big things we really focused on is public engagement. This is our third round of public meetings, so we've had a really big push on public engagement, from these big virtual meetings down to community meetings, down to conversations with just individual community members who have concern about a particular alignment here or there. So we spent a lot of time focused on getting input from folks. Coordination with other projects is really a key for the Silver Line. And one of the reasons that we've progressed design early on is really kind of have an opportunity to coordinate with many projects, many of those NCDOT projects, which are progressing through the various design phases. So really wanted to get comfortable with all the NCDOT rail projects, and also for the NCDOT to have the opportunity to coordinate with the Silver Line so we can all move forward on similar paths. And really, and also there's a lot of folks, on this call from CATS and within the city who have a lot of good lessons that they've learned from the Blue Line and Blue Line extension. So we wanted to take some time and really write those down, document all those lessons learned, and make sure that we're putting forward the best information we can to build the best project that the Silver Line can be based on our experience. So that kind of took us from the big line down to the 100 particular different lines. And then we have to figure out, how do we break that? How do we shortlist that 100 lines? How do you choose one of 100 lines based on any number of criteria? So we developed this decision-making criteria based on benefits and risks. So the goal is to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks as you compare one alignment versus another. So and as far as benefits go, some of the big benefits we're trying to achieve is travel time. So we want to make sure we have a fast, reliable transit system that's can compete against private vehicles as much as possible. We want to make sure that we have good local connectivity, meaning you can get from your house to wherever you're going via light rail. And we want to make sure that there's ample development opportunities and those benefits around the station, the secondary benefits, creating great places that we all want to see in our communities. But all the while, we're also moving forward to the project that we're trying to implement. So we want to manage our risks. So we want to make sure that we're managing our costs, both capital costs and operating costs, because we intend this project would be competing for state and federal dollars and funds. So we want to make sure that we're putting forward the best cost-effective project we can. We want to also make sure that we're evaluating our environmental concerns. Because of this, we'll pursue a federal funding stream. It will have to go through a very robust environmental process. So, any number of environmental issues can slow down or stop a project. So we want to make sure that we've done enough screening to feel comfortable with the alignment that we're putting forward. And we want to, again, obviously really coordinate with others to make sure that there's no big issues out there with any of the stakeholders that we're working with. And that could be the freight railroads or NCDOT or the hospitals or the towns and all the various stakeholders who have an interest in the Silver Line project. So once we do that analysis, really come down to this kind of very simplified flow chart. It's really what we're looking for is, does the option or alternative with the least risk also have the most benefit. If those two things are the same, then for the most part, we have our recommendation, and that follows along the top line. And that's the kind of the easy button as far as decisions go. If there's a situation where those are not the same, if it's maybe the least risk is also low benefit, or vice versa, if most benefit also has the most risk, then it kicks you down here to a question of an evaluation, which gets into like, does the option have with greater benefits have acceptable risks? So if it does, then if the benefits are worth it, then we accept the risks and we move on, and that's our recommendation. Conversely, if the benefits are not worth the risk, then we select the option with the least risk. So that's kind of like a little bit of a snapshot for how we've boiled this big line down to many lines, down to one line, to put forward a recommendation. So now to get into a little bit of the details for that recommendation, and don't worry, we will go into some of the online open house, which has a live map where people can zoom in and pan around and see things. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But to talk about some of the preliminary staff recommendations, let me take a moment to kind of orient folks to the map. So these are the maps that went out in a public mailer. These are also the maps that are on our website. But just to help understand, this is focus area 2. So this boundary is a half-mile boundary around the preferred alignment. The purple line in the middle designates the preliminary staff recommendation, or what we're recommending for an alignment. If you see a yellow triangle with an exclamation mark, especially up here, you'll note that this is a change or a proposed change from the adopted LPA that was adopted back in 2019. You also note that these boxes that are around the purple line designate kind of a decision zone or a recommendation zone, an area that we really focus on that may or may not change based on our initial evaluation. And so that is the primary focus of the presentation and the recommendations for tonight. So just to kind of go from the west to the east, is really the first decision zone is about basically how we get past and serve the airport. So you'll see these gray lines. The gray lines that you see are alignments that we have previously evaluated, but are not recommending at this time. And in this case, there was a alignment put forward as part of a broader land use plan put forward by the airport. And one of the comments was to evaluate an alignment that goes through this area. So we have evaluated that, and we think there certainly is merit in that. We feel like that's an ongoing conversation that we're going to keep having with the airport. At this time, we're not prepared to recommend that for our locally preferred alternative, but we're going to keep working with the airport to better understand their timelines for that land use plan. But at this time, our alignment is going to continue, and this is very similar or the same as the locally preferred alternative that was adopted back in 2019, which goes along Wilkinson Boulevard. It actually, in this case, just to get a little more detail, the alignment is actually on the northern side of Wilkinson Boulevard, connecting to a proposed multimodal center and people mover put forward by the airport. So the idea is that you can take the light rail to the stop, get off, and then get onto a people mover and go on into the terminal. The second decision zone in this area is really focused on how do you get from Mulberry Church Road the rest of the way into Center City. There, the locally preferred alternative had identified Wilkinson Boulevard as the preferred alignment. One thing just to note, when we really started to look at this, really noted how many lanes there are in Wilkinson Boulevard and how narrow the right-of-way is. There's 6 lanes in there today, and there's not a lot of remnant right-of-way. When we really started to look at including light rail into a reconstructed Wilkinson, it nearly doubled the width of Wilkinson Boulevard. And that was just a red flag for us as we continued to evaluate, these alternatives. From that impact caused us to look at an alignment that goes parallel to Norfolk Southern, not within Norfolk Southern right away, or not on their tracks either, but adjacent to and not within their right away. That's something that we kind of looked at is in our early evaluation, and there was a lot of interest from the planning and development teams who really thought that could really create kind of a unique development opportunity along this entire area from Morrisfield the whole way into Suttle Avenue. So the justification or
documentation for why we've kind of made this recommendation is to avoid the impacts of reconstructing Wilkinson Boulevard, including the community, real estate, and business impacts of that construction, and try to seek some development potential of the space between Wilkinson and Norfolk Southern. So just to get into the weeds, and I'll quickly kind of go through this map, which is a little more detailed with aerials, and kind of show where we're assuming aerial stations or aerial bridges and those sort of things. And we can have some other conversations in the Q&A. So from west to east, we start at I-485. The idea here is near the intersection of Todd Road and Wilkinson Boulevard, there would be a park and ride near the interstate. So we want to be able to provide a good park and ride access for folks to be able to get off at I-485 or Wilkinson Boulevard to get on at that major confluence of those streets and get on light rail. It would then follow the northern side of Wilkinson Boulevard the whole way up to the airport near Little Rock Road. There'll be a station here, as I said, with the planned multimodal center and people mover in this area. The light rail alignment would then propose to go under Little Rock Road and then continue on the northern side past FedEx and Old Dominion. Continuing down past Stafford. And then would at this point, we're evaluating going over Billy Graham Parkway and back down the grade. We would have a station between Stafford and Boyer. We're kind of evaluating exactly where that station is configured, but we're trying to seek to serve the Goodwill Opportunity Campus as best we're able to. So we're looking at some different ways to provide that connection. After we come down after Billy Graham, we would then transition from north side of Wilkinson into the Norfolk Southern adjacent right away, which would be right along this area, paralleling Norfolk Southern. We would have a station near Morrisfield Drive with a park and ride to pick people up who may be driving on Wilkinson Boulevard or from Morrisfield. Follow that along and past and across Old Steel Creek with a station near Ashley Road. We think that there's a real opportunity to provide some good crosstown connections from Ashley over to Remount, or Clanton, sorry about that, and provide some opportunities for bus connections and parking connections. Another station near Remount and Camp Green. And then with a final station before we leave this segment near Suttle Avenue. So some of the things that we've talked about in our early coordination with our folks in planning is really about kind of the unique opportunities of the opportunities to redevelop and think through, kind of reimagine what this area could be. Maybe I'll kind of recognize John Howard for a moment, who can talk about some of the things that the TOD team has looked at in this area.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. This is a very unique area, as a lot of you all probably know if you live here or work here or pass through here on a regular basis. There's a lot going on Wilkinson Boulevard, as Andy was saying. There's businesses, some new, some older. There's historic properties in any area. There's single-family neighborhoods to the north and south. And you have Ashley Park and Camp Green, and you have those to the south along Remount. You also have a lot of vacant land. You have industrial property. But what you're seeing too is locationally, it's right against I-77 in Uptown. And you're also like less than maybe 2 to 3 miles from the airport. And it really is kind of the first or last urban area once you get to and from Uptown, Center City, Charlotte. So that, and the fact that if you look at the map again, you'll see that a lot of streets, once you kind of get off maybe the first block or so along Wilkinson Boulevard to the south, there's a lot of disconnected streets. There's a lot of vacant land. There's a lot of landlocked properties. So we're thinking that with this alignment, you are staying away from Wilkinson and those impacts, and basically you're not demolishing, two sides of the street, but you're also creating opportunity here. One, to reconnect some streets, to improve pedestrian access to the stations, to get people safely to and from their neighborhoods. And also the landscape here, again, is a little bit different. You've got some, again, single family, existing older neighborhoods. You've got a lot of infill single family. You've got some what we call NOAA property, that's naturally occurring affordable housing, which is a little bit less to market rental rates, but they're privately owned and funded. They're not publicly funded. So we have a few of those as well along the corridor. So we're thinking that once you look at, again, the vacant property here and kind of reconnecting streets that may have been blocked off in the past, can we stitch that back together again and connect neighborhoods to each other and to transit? So that's really one of the biggest advantages here. And, you know, not just recreating a South End environment, you know, proximity-wise, they are about the same locationally next to Uptown Charlotte, but, you know, different places mature differently. So again, this could be a unique opportunity, we think, for different types of redevelopment, not just new construction, which there is happening. There's new multifamily along Morehead. There's more coming on along down the road. But there's a balance that we can probably see. We think light rail can really be an enhancement and improve the quality of life and get people to and from where they need to be, but also to help sustain neighborhoods along the corridor.
Yep. Thanks, John. And one other thing that this alignment kind of provides, or a potential benefit, is really, as far as the rail trail goes, providing an opportunity to kind of have a rail trail parallel with the Silver Line without, you know, adjacent to the railroad, provides a kind of a unique opportunity. And I'll maybe recognize Jason Lawrence, who's our rail trail project manager, and kind of talk about that opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And I think John really summed it up when he said opportunity. When you look at this portion of this alignment and opportunity for new land uses and new transit-oriented development, but really it provides a very unique opportunity for the rail trail experience. If you think about what's happened and occurred in South End, where you have the rail and the trail is up against the rail corridor, and then you have supporting street network to accommodate travel to development. We have a similar type of setup here, where the rail trail could be very close to the rail corridor. If we were in the median of Wilkinson Boulevard, that would require a lot of improvements to kind of that back of curb environment. You wouldn't have that kind of same pedestrian and cyclist experience along Wilkinson Boulevard. But we do feel along this piece of the Norfolk Southern adjacent, we can really capitalize on unique opportunities for the rail trail.
Great, thank you, Jason. Let's see. So we're done with that, but we are going to go to the public meeting maps in a minute in the online open house. But maybe kick it back to John Howard and maybe talk us through the next steps and where we're going from here.
Sure, thanks, Andy. So right now we're in public engagement round 3 of our meetings, and the next steps are to present staff recommendations and see public input, which is what we're doing today and tonight in the next few weeks. Early 2021, this spring, we're going to go to the MTC and present the adoption recommendations. And in April, hopefully we'll go for a decision on the final alignment. And then we'll move into, from 21 to 24, advancing the light rail design, get into environmental surveying. And again, we mentioned station area planning, which is what I'll be working on. And Jason Lawrence will work on the rail trail alignment, define how to do that together. And also develop an affordable housing strategy. One of our lessons learned from the Blue Line and BLE was including mixed income housing and affordable housing in our projects involving light rail. So again, that's something that we're going to be looking at proactively in the TOD study for Silver Line.
Great. Thank you, John. Let's see if I can find trying to find, there we go. So I want to take a moment to kind of walk through, before we go to the Q&A, to walk through, how to get to our online open house, because all the information that we presented tonight is available to you through our website. And so if you go back and want to look at something again, you can find it. I'm going to show you where you can find it. So this is our website. This is ridetransit.org. So if you go to projects and transit planning, Silver Line,
I'll take you to this. You'll see a link here to online open house. If you click on that, I already had it open. But if you click on that, that'll take you to this website. And it provides a nice overview of all the information, the maps, the recommendations, slides, videos describing our decision-making process, and then into our preliminary recommendations. I'll just quickly scroll down because we don't have to see all this stuff again, but you might want to go back and look at it. So all the recommendations that we're putting forward are available here. So this is the one we went over tonight. If you click on the arrow to the right, you'll see the one through uptown and beyond. But one of the big things that's really successful and really people like is the virtual map, so that people can kind of zoom in and do whatever they want with. So if you go to here, I'll keep this open because it's a good resource for our live Q&A. You can kind of zoom in and kind of see where our purple proposed alignment is and all the other alignments that we've evaluated. One other note, we are doing a survey, so you can get to that survey down below right here. So after the public meeting information, so you can remind yourself for upcoming ones, but there's also a link to the survey here, and we are providing, if you fill out the survey, you are running for a gift card. So we're really putting forward, trying to get some good public engagement. And then all the opportunities to contact us are also available at this location as well. So I'll keep this available and ready to go as we get into the Q&A. But I think now I will kick it over to Ajanelle Poole, who will kind of get us started through the Q&A.
Thanks, Andy. And hello, and thank you to our panelists for joining us today as well. And hello, everyone. Like Andy said, my name is Ajanelle Poole. I'm the Community and Public Relations Specialist for CATS and also for this project. Again, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to attend our live virtual public meeting tonight. Like Andy had mentioned earlier, when we had done a round of engagement last year, we had to do them virtually because of the pandemic. And unfortunately, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. So we do like to acknowledge that, this is not always everyone's favorite way to do any type of engagement or present information, but we do appreciate everyone for engaging with us through this process. I do want to reiterate just a few things that Andy did mention. I'm going to ask our panelists to please stay on mute until you're answering a question. And then when you do, please turn your camera on. If we have any attendees that would like to ask the project team a question, please sign into your Gmail or your YouTube account and then drop your question in the chat box on YouTube, and we'll make sure that the project team addresses it. I would suggest that you sign off any VPN or organizational servers just for best connection. And then we will be answering questions that we receive on YouTube, like I mentioned, and also questions that were received previously via any phone calls or mail or email. We will do our best to get through the questions tonight. Questions that we do not answer this evening, we will address in a document that will go on our website. And then as a note, we will be focusing on focus area 2 tonight. So with that, I'm going to start with a frequently asked question that we get, especially along this corridor, this focus area, which is about the airport and access to the airport. So if Jenna Nichols is available, I'll pitch this one to her, which says, can you talk a little bit more about what the connection to the airport will be and what those reasons are?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, one thing that we know about the Charlotte Airport is that it started out as a smaller regional airport, and it's just continued to grow along with the Charlotte region. And so, we think about the Silver Line project as a project that's multi-generational. It's a 50 to 100 year investment, and we need to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as we design. In the same hand, the Charlotte Airport of today is not the Charlotte Airport of the future. It's continuing to grow and expand. And so, we do plan on having a premier light rail station at the airport that will support the airport's future land use and development plans. That airport station will be designed so as to be an extension of the main terminal, such that passengers arriving via the light rail will feel as if they've arrived directly at the airport terminal. So there'll be terminal services such as baggage claim and ticketing. And after checking your bag or printing your tickets, you'll be able to hop on a people mover that will bring you directly into the terminal. This is pretty common, especially post 9/11. It's pretty common to have light rail alignments that don't go directly into a terminal, but that have that premier people mover connection. Our airport is also unique. You can see here in the graphic, you can see, and if you're familiar with the Charlotte Airport, it's that U shape. There's some geographic challenges in terms of the circulation, and there's some parking decks that would really sort of prevent us from going directly in there. And there's also the Norfolk Southern Freight Railroad corridor. So we would need to be grade separated from the freight railroad tracks. And that would likely be an elevated structure, which could pose issues with the runways. So the way the runways are oriented, we need to make sure we're not in the glide path of the airplanes. So there's some unique challenges with the Charlotte Airport, and but we also see that as opportunity to be able to allow an extension of that airport to the multimodal center and to our airport station. So it will still be a premier connection. I don't know if Stuart Hare has anything he wants to add to that. Stuart's with the airport.
Hey, good evening. This is Stuart Hare with the Aviation Department with the airport. I think you answered the question well, Jenna. I think that one of the key things to emphasize and to understand is that we are moving that terminal experience further out to Wilkinson, that it will not be just at the existing terminal. In addition, we're looking at redevelopment opportunities throughout this whole area so that we have an airport edge city, that there is a place being made around this station, and that it's more than just connectivity to the airport, that it's all about connectivity across our region. So there's multiple things to keep in mind there, but I think you did a great job, Jenna, in kind of summarizing the thought process and the long-term vision of not only the airport, but also CATS.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Stuart. Another frequently asked question that we get has to do with TOD. Although light rail spurs immense economic development, it also comes with concerns of gentrification and resident displacement. John Howard, you talked a little bit earlier about the TOD study. What are some ways that that study will address some of those concerns?
All right, thank you, Anjanelle. So a key component of the TOD study is station area planning, which has a lot of different components to it. I think, again, one of the lessons learned from the Blue Line and BLE is we're now including housing professionals. Our housing staff is on our team now. We also have park and recreations. We're going to open space a little bit differently now. And, we can't solve every problem for displacement or affordable housing with this 26-mile alignment. It's definitely a citywide issue. It's a regional issue now too. But we're definitely going to do our part and, again, think proactively about strategies for how we can leverage existing tools in the toolbox. Understanding that, Gaston County may be in a different place than us, and Union County may be in a different place in Matthews. But at least for the city of Charlotte, we have great examples of great ideas and policies in place that are being used. And so we'll examine those as we go through our station area planning process, which will begin around late spring of this year. And again, that'll involve community engagement. We'll have public meetings, probably the same as what we're doing now virtually, but we'll see how things progress. And we'll look at land use, we'll look at connectivity around the stations. That is, how do you get the right kind of streets, the right connections, whether it's pedestrian or bicycle, and also how does that interface with our existing bus service. So that area planning effort will be one way to look at all of those different components for each of the stations or the dots on the map, which right now are not exactly to the foot where they may be. That'll be another discussion to look at if they will move or not, or if we need to add or subtract some stations or shift some. But that's what the station area planning effort will encompass when we get into it, is looking at land use, street connections, bus interaction, affordable housing, and other preservation type elements that go along with stationary planning.
Thank you, John. We're going to take some questions from YouTube. Will the 485 stop be the last stop if Gaston County doesn't pass anything towards funding of the line, or will it be closer in, say, at the airport? So I don't know if we have anyone that would like to take that one. Or Andy, I'm going to pitch that one to you to start us off.
Sure. Yeah, so we at this point, what we're trying to put forward with is a project that meets the kind of the LPA, which is seeking to go from Belmont the whole way to Center City and out to Union County, Stallings, and Indian Trail. We're going to continue to evaluate and work with the funding team who are looking at different ways to fund the project. At this point, we're not talking about any sort of different scope of the project other than the entire length at this point. And as we continue to that conversation with the public continues to go on, we will kind of react to that as that funding question is answered.
Thanks, Andy. Another question from YouTube. Could long span bridges be used more instead of the concrete retaining walls? Even with the art, they still create a physical barrier for neighborhoods. And I see, Jenna, you turned your camera on. And you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, so absolutely. There's opportunities to use different bridge treatments along the corridor. And that's something that we'll be evaluating as we get further into design. But one of the things that we do pay attention to is the access and the connectivity. And so we do want to try to avoid creating barriers for the folks that we want to be using the light rail. So that's definitely a consideration. And it's something too that we've evolved over the course of delivering the original Blue Line and the Blue Line extension. And so I imagine that even our bridge structures here will evolve to be something, that could be slightly different from what we see on both of those corridors. So it will be definitely a contextual solution. And those are some of the things that we'll be considering. But yeah, an elevated bridge structure that's more open is definitely, on the table for consideration.
Thanks, Jenna. When the light rail is riding alongside of Wilkinson, will it be right beside it or set off so that businesses can still be located on that side of Wilkinson?
So for the most part, when we're talking about side running in this section, we'll be basically somewhere near the back of curb. It kind of depends on the situation. We're evaluating different types of cross sections. So we don't exactly know exactly where the light rail sits as it relates to the road. In general, our thinking is that it's usually right back of curb. There may be situations where it needs to be set back for one reason or another away from that first back of curb type of a scenario. And that's, I think, once we kind of get into the design a little bit deeper, we'll know a lot more about exactly where the silver line sits. But the initial thought is it's somewhere along the back of curb.
Thank you, Andy. Why 3 stations along rail line, Ashley, Greenmount, and Sutthole? John, do you want to take that one, or Andy?
That's John. That's a good John one.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. We had this discussion today, actually. So again, if you look at the context of where this alignment is in this section, it really is the most urban part of the alignment once you start getting into Center City. And if you think about it, if you look at Blue Line and BLE going to the north, I mean, that first mile or so, once you get out of Center City, they tend to have the closer stations. They're walk-up type stations. They have the most connectivity or at least potential for it. And they're most urbanized compared to other parts of the corridor for the most part. So what we're thinking, and again, a lot of the parcels here are either underutilized or vacant. So we're thinking this again is a great opportunity here to have multiple stations. Yeah, they are closer in proximity compared to others that are farther out, but it kind of lends itself to have those more urban type stations closer into Center City, Charlotte.
Thank you, John. And while I have you, similar question, I don't know if you covered it previously, but what elements did you use to make the decision on station locations, especially the distance between them? Example, the Mooresfield Drive from the Ashley stop That's about a little more than 1 mile, or about 1 mile apart.
Yeah, so part of it is it's a multi-pronged question. Part of it is key connections to existing streets. Another could be potential land use redevelopment. Another could be environmental impacts or the lack thereof. So there's different ways of looking at where stations are going exactly. And again, we're still in that kind of early phase of figuring out if some should be combined or if we should add some in different places. So even though this is the LPA, or at least our recommendation, it may change. It may change in the near future. So, but for right now, again, the further out stations tend to be a little bit spaced out further. Again, if you look at Blue Line and look at Blue Line Extension, it's the same pattern. They're a little bit further spaced in terms of its development pattern.
One thing also to note about station spacing, it's something that we look at a lot because we want to make sure we're putting forward the best operating project possible. So we want to make sure we have good run times. But the stations, we need to meet those land use goals, those broader goals that we're trying to seek. But also the stations need to be on flat, straight track, so they can't be on a curve. So if there's a hill that the light rail has to go up, and we have to go up and very gradually. So the existing topography and the way that we're actually designing the track itself actually also affects the station. So as you notice, we don't have any stations on curve, so we have to kind of plan the stations way in advance, and every station affects everything downstream and upstream. So on top of those broader issues that John was identifying, and all those are critical as well, there's also some practical and engineering constraints that we have to really weigh when we're looking at the station. So station spacing and station location is a very complicated thing that takes a lot of different perspectives to really get right.
Thank you, John and Andy. Is the reasoning to run the line along the railroad to keep a top train speed?
Well, I think that's a side benefit. I mean, I don't think that's not the primary reason. I think the primary reason why we've kind of are proposing this is what we've kind of said, is that unique development opportunity and to mitigate those impacts along. But it is a nice side benefit. We will be able to have a more reliable, faster travel trip. So that's certainly one of the things when we look at our benefits and risks that really, that was another little peg in the side of the NS adjacent. So yeah, it's a nice benefit to that as well.
Thank you, Andy. Was consideration given to reducing Wilkinson to 4 or 5 lanes to keep the Silver Line in that corridor while mitigating some of the impacts of widening?
Yeah, so that was something that was evaluated early on. I mean, there is a lot of traffic on existing Wilkinson today, and so 6 lanes were put in for a reason. I don't know, Jenna piped turned her camera on, so let's see what Jenna's input on it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I was just going to add that NCDOT has identified this at Wilkinson Boulevard as a strategic transportation corridor, and so in discussions with NCDOT, they've identified that it's important to them that remain 6 lane, or the ability to have 6 lanes. And we do have Stuart Basham on the panel tonight in case he wanted to have any comments to add to that.
I'm going to add real quick, just as a follow-up to that question. It looks like the line runs in the middle of Wilkinson from around Stanford until Mulberry Church Road. So I don't know if that helps clarify a little bit more about that question.
Actually, as you know, so this is one where this is kind of evolving design as we go. So our current thinking is the light rail would be actually on the northern side, from Mulberry Church out towards the airport. So it's kind of an area of evolving design, looking at a couple different options. But we would intend to be on the northern side at this point after Mulberry Church Road. I don't know, Stuart, you want to jump in and talk about that capacity issue on the inner part of the corridor?
Sure, Andy. Thank you. I'm Stuart Basham. I'm with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. As Andy and Jenna both mentioned, we have had some extensive conversations about where light rail could be located in relation to Wilkinson Boulevard. In looking at the corridor, we found that the average daily traffic volumes between uptown and roughly the airport are in the neighborhood of 35 to 38,000, which is borderline between a 4-lane typical section versus a 6-lane section. So we have recommended that we need that 6-lane section to remain in order to have capacity for future development in the area near the airport, as well as providing a primary route from uptown to the River District and other developments that are coming in future years. So unfortunately, we're not able to take a lane down or make any laneage changes to be able to accommodate light rail in the Wilkinson area.
Thank you, Stuart and Andy. Railroads are hard to cross. How will pedestrian connections be made across the Southern Railway? So that might be a good one for Jason Lawrence to talk about the rail trail effort, or if someone else wants to take that one.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I'll start with that, but I think that might be more related to the kind of stationary planning work. I mean, the rail trail is looking at those opportunities to have a kind of a parallel trail along the entire alignment. So the trail would not be, crossing the Norfolk Southern corridor. There are a number of potential street connections there. You got Remount. You have a future connection of Clanton, Ashley, and the NCDOT project. You get Old Still Creek. And the station area plans will look at all those kind of pedestrian needs and road access to the station area. So certainly a challenge to cross the railroad, but we are fortunate to already have a couple crossings there and some future crossings into the future.
And I'll add just one other thing as part of the area planning process. We have a pretty comprehensive team that we work with. We have Charlotte DOT on board as well. So they will definitely help us figure out like how those connections can be made and how safe they can be. And we also have, of course, Stewart and NCDOT as far as getting across Wilkinson Boulevard, because again, crossing Remount and other intersections can be intimidating. People do it. We have bus service out there now. People do access that road, but part of the planning work would be to make safe pedestrian and bike connections as well as vehicular.
Thank you, John. And while I have you, another question maybe about the TOD effort. The existing Blue Line stations are great for transit, but little else, sans JW Clay and CTC. Will there be an effort to make stations more multifunctional, especially with elevated stations? There's a great potential to create many community centers at ground level below elevated stations.
Yeah, there's a lot in that comment and question. So if you look at, some of our, more pedestrian-friendly kind of mixed use transit stations, like, again, the ones that are closer in, 36th Street, for example, Sugar Creek, and some others that are coming online now, and those in the South End and further out that are now just starting to see development. Those things kind of happen over time. Again, if you're further out, there's a lot of potential for different types of land use activity, maybe not the kind of mixture that ideally that you want to see around a transit station, but again, with limitations on, like for the airport, flight paths or other kind of barriers, it can lend itself to different types of land use activity, office or industrial employment, access to opportunities like schools and other things are very important to us too. But understanding that these stations won't all develop at the same maturity rate at the same time. So during our market study analysis of the planning effort, we'll look at that as well and seeing what types of land uses will be most complementary, not just to the station itself, but also to the surrounding community around it. And a secondary piece of that is a good point of underpasses and those kinds of environments. And how can we activate those places? So with part of our city planning department and their placemaking efforts, I'm sure we'll have lots of urban design solutions, or at least ideas to how you activate those above and below ground spaces. So again, that'll be part of our planning work and urban design work as we move forward.
Thank you, John. We have several questions that we're going to try to get through in the time that we have left. But again, if we do not get to your question this evening, we will be sure to answer them in a document that will go on our website. Another question from YouTube. Can you clarify what you mean by going under Little Rock? There's no overpass there.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is that we would want to cross under, we would create a new grade separation where the light rail would go under the existing, this might be Josh Birmingham. Sorry about that. I get those two mixed up. But to go under the main access road, we would propose to take light rail down below grade and below the road. And a lot of the people mentioned flight paths a couple other times. So that's one concern, or elevating this close to the airport. So our initial thought was that we would try to be below grade, underneath and low, down below Little Rock / Josh Birmingham, adjacent to the future multimodal center.
Thanks, Andy. A couple more questions. Will the airport people mover be built and ready to go when the Silver Line is operational? I don't know if Stuart is still here and he wants to take that one, or Jenna, I see you took off your camera. Either one.
I was just going to suggest we hand that to Stuart here.
Awesome. Thank you, Stuart.
Hey, thanks for the question, Anjanelle. I think that is a great question. And I think that really goes to show the challenges that we are talking about with this being such a complex problem. You know, we're not only designing for a new light rail line here, but we're also talking about massive capital improvement programs at CLT. And as you may be familiar, we have about $3 billion worth of capital improvements underway right now. When we finish that phase in the next couple of years, we will then start into a new master planning process, and the people mover is going to be part of that master planning process. So we don't have a date of delivery yet on a calendar for a new people mover, but we do intentionally have an alignment already identified so that we could have a dedicated busway or some sort of dedicated connection on day one if the schedules don't sync up. But we are diligently working to have those scheduled so that it is that seamless experience.
Thank you, Stuart. We have time for one last question. I'm sorry, I lost it just then. But the question was about a property along Wilkinson and what possible property impacts that might be. I'm sorry, I lost it. So Andy, do you want to just answer the question? Excuse me, here we go. My business is on Wilkinson. Will the train be located on Wilkinson at Fairhaven? The map is vague. And then also, if you maybe want to talk about any top possible concerns about property or business impacts along Wilkinson.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar exactly where Fairhaven Road is, but I'll talk a little at a high level. We always get questions about property and impacts, and they're good and appropriate questions. So just to kind of talk about where we are in the process, we're at the very beginning. So we really don't have a specific footprint of the project. With the footprint of the project would tell us how much property that we need to buy. So we really don't know really at this point how much property we need from any particular property. So we really only know that as we progress design. So when we move forward with design, we'll understand more about what, a lot of things are going to inform that, including grading, where will the slopes be and where will the utilities be, and a lot of questions that we don't have answers to at this point. So, but we are, as we progress design, that will become more evident as we get more definition. So in the next couple of years, we'll really have a better understanding for what the footprint of the project will be. And then also at the same time, we'll also be working through the environmental clearance process. Once we have those two variables, once we know the footprint of the project, how much property that we'll actually need to acquire from each property owner, and we have the environmental clearance from the federal government to actually begin acquiring that property, then we'll approach each particular property owner and to begin the acquisition of the necessary property. So I don't have a specific answer for how much property we need for any particular property yet, because we're just really that conceptual. But as things clear up and as we progress design, we'll do specific outreach as part of our environmental program, which will help communicate that to the property owners that we do need to acquire from.
Thank you,
Okay.
Andy. That was our last question. If Jenna, you want to close us out, thank you.
Sure. Andy, I'll ask you to bring up the slide with the contact information.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Hopefully you all felt like this was a good process and very valuable and a good use of your time. I hope that you feel like you've learned some stuff. We will be compiling all of the comments, as Ajanal said, and addressing them, the ones that were not addressed, and posting those responses to our website. As you can see on this slide here, our public commenting period ends on March 11th. So we're encouraging everybody to go to the website and provide us your comments, take the online survey. The website is www.ridetransit.org/LYNX. That website will bring you to a number of different links, for a link for the online open house, as Andy showed earlier, as well as a link to the YouTube recordings of these virtual public meetings. You can take the survey there as well. And you can also take the survey by texting. Texting Silverline to 704-461-4441. You can send us an email if you have comments or questions that you don't put into your survey. So you can send us an email at linkssilverline@publicinput.com. You can also always give us a phone call at 704-336-7433. And you can call and leave a voicemail with comments. That phone number is 704-461-4441, and type the code 6636. And you can always send us a letter to Charlotte Area Transit System, care of Marketing Department, 3200 South Boulevard, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28209. Again, just a reminder that the commenting period ends March 11th. And Andy mentioned this earlier, but we are going to be giving away 5 $100 gift cards to random winners of those who take the survey. So that's some incentive to go ahead and take that survey so that your name can be entered into a drawing for winning one of those gift cards. Again, thank you all for your time tonight and your focus. We really appreciate all of your great comments and your involvement. Please stay tuned. Continue to go to our website throughout the course of this project for updates and for downloadable materials. Your input is very critical to helping us make sure that this multi-generational transformational project reflects the opinions and views of the community in which it's serving. So we want to make sure we're making the right decisions moving forward. So thank you for your input and have a great night.